Standing in my bustling graphic design studio one afternoon, reviewing proofs for a client, I felt a surprising sense of peace. The path I'd chosen hadn't been easy. Confronting family, especially when money and deep-seated emotional patterns are involved, is incredibly difficult. Cutting ties, even toxic ones, leave scars. But the alternative, continuing to enable disrespect and exploitation, continuing to pour resources into a dynamic that depleted me financially and emotionally, was no longer tenable. My better idea wasn't just about denying Chloe the money. It was about reclaiming my own power, my own narrative, my own financial future. It was about sending a clear message. My generosity is not an entitlement, and my absence, when requested, comes with the withdrawal of all benefits. Sometimes the most powerful gift you can give someone who takes you for granted is the stark reality of life without your support. I had lost a sister, and perhaps the illusion of the family I thought I had, but I had gained something far more valuable: my self-respect and the quiet freedom of living life entirely on my own terms. Then, almost exactly a year after the wedding fiasco, I flew to Houston for a conference completely unrelated to family. While grabbing coffee near the convention center, I literally bumped into my parents. The encounter was jarring, unexpected. They looked older, more tired than I remembered. After a moment of stunned silence, Mom spoke first, her voice trembling slightly. "Maya? Oh my goodness, it's really you." Dad stood beside her, looking awkward and uncomfortable, unable to meet my eyes initially. Mom rushed forward, ignoring the passers-by. "Honey, we're so sorry. About everything. What Chloe did. How we handled it. It was wrong. We miss you terribly." Dad mumbled a gruff agreement, finally looking at me with an expression that seemed to hold genuine regret. Can we maybe sit down? Talk? Maybe start over?" Mom pleaded, her eyes welling up. Chloe, notably, was nowhere in sight. Seeing them there, vulnerable and apologetic, stirred something complicated within me. The hurt was still there, but the anger had faded into a dull scar. Starting over felt impossible, but the idea of some form of cautious, heavily boundaried contact, it was unexpectedly tempting, yet terrifying. What should I do? Agree to talk cautiously. Hear them out, acknowledge their apology, but make it explicitly clear that starting over doesn't mean reverting to the old dynamic. Establish firm boundaries immediately about expectations, financial or otherwise. Test the waters for a potential, very different future relationship, knowing trust will take years, if ever, to rebuild. B. Politely decline. Acknowledge their apology briefly, but state firmly that too much damage has been done, and you need to maintain your distance for your own well-being. Wish them well, but make it clear that reopening that door is not an option for you right now or possibly ever. Protect your hard-won peace. The genesis of Innovate and Elevate wasn't a glamorous Silicon Valley fairy tale. It was born of frustration and a flicker of inspiration during my soul-crushingly boring tenure as a junior marketing associate at a large, dinosauric, Philadelphia-based insurance company. Ironically, a sister company to the one Jessica would later work for. I saw huge inefficiencies in corporate training methods, the potential for engaging online learning, and I felt a burning desire to build something better, something more impactful, something on my own terms. Leaving that stable, benefits-laden job with only a vague business plan and about 6 months' worth of savings felt like stepping off a cliff into a fog bank. My parents were appalled. "You're throwing away a perfectly good career, Claire, for what, some internet pipe dream?" Dad had thundered. Mom had cried, convinced I was headed for financial ruin. Jessica had just smirked, predicting I'd be back begging for my old job within a year. Their lack of faith was fuel, albeit a bitter, smoky kind. I moved across the country to Seattle, drawn by its burgeoning tech scene and needing the physical distance from their negativity. The early years were a relentless grind that blurred into one long, caffeine-fueled haze. My corporate headquarters was a stained IKEA desk crammed into the corner of my tiny, perpetually damp studio apartment in Capitol Hill. My diet consisted primarily of instant ramen, dollar store coffee that tasted vaguely of burnt plastic, and the occasional celebratory splurge on a Trader Joe's frozen pizza when I landed a minuscule freelance gig to keep the lights on. Sleep felt like a decadent luxury, often sacrificed for debugging code until 3 a.m. or frantically rewriting pitch decks after yet another potential investor politely showed me the door, citing my lack of a track record, lack of collateral, lack of a co-founder. The loneliness was profound, amplified by the constant nagging echo of my family's doubts. Was I crazy? Was this all a colossal mistake? And through that grueling period, the support from home remained consistently unhelpful. Phone calls rarely offered genuine encouragement. Instead, they were filled with thinly veiled skepticism and uninvited advice. "Are you eating properly, Claire? You sound like you're losing weight. Maybe this startup stress isn't good for you. Is it really healthy, dear, working such ridiculously long hours for something so uncertain? Jessica gets 4 weeks of paid vacation, you know. Don't you think it's time to be realistic now? Face facts? Maybe you could move back home for a bit, save some money, regroup, find a real job here." My small victories. Finally landing my first tiny but paying client, successfully debugging a critical piece of code after a 72-hour non-stop coding marathon, receiving a positive mention on an obscure industry blog that felt like winning an Oscar, were consistently met with polite but utterly dismissive, "Oh, that's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably, deflatingly, shifted back to Jessica's predictable corporate ladder climb, her upcoming tropical vacation meticulously planned and paid for by her reliable salary, or the latest gossip about second cousins I barely knew. Jessica, thriving in her role as the sensible daughter, seemed to particularly relish highlighting the contrast between our lives. During her occasional visits to Seattle, usually tacked onto a work trip paid for by her company, she'd survey my cramped apartment, overflowing with work papers and prototype sketches, with a pitying expression. "Wow, Claire, still living the glamorous startup dream, huh?" she'd say with a light laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I could never handle this kind of uncertainty. My company's benefits package alone is probably worth more than your apartment." She developed a habit of forwarding me job listings for mid-level corporate marketing positions back on the East Coast, framing it innocuously as, "Just saw this and thought of you, looks stable." But the subtext was always clear. Give up this foolishness and come back to reality. She'd then report back to Mom and Dad, I later learned through a sympathetic aunt, with exaggerated tales of how stressed I seemed, how disorganized my life appeared. "She eats cereal for dinner, Mom," effectively reinforcing their deeply entrenched narrative that my entrepreneurial venture was a reckless, doomed folly. It wasn't just a lack of belief from my family. At times, it felt like active, insidious non-support, perhaps fueled by a sliver of subconscious jealousy she herself couldn't acknowledge, cleverly disguised as pragmatic concern. Out of self-preservation, I gradually learned to shield myself. I erected emotional bulkheads. I stopped sharing the daily struggles, the near failures, the terrifying cash flow crunches, because they were invariably met with unsolicited advice, or worse, barely concealed "I told you so's." I stopped trumpeting the small, hard-won triumphs because their lukewarm reception felt more deflating than silence. I curated our conversations, keeping them relentlessly superficial, focusing intently on asking about their mundane lives, deflecting any probing questions about my business with vague, optimistic platitudes. "Things are really busy, but definitely moving in the right direction," became my standard, deliberately uninformative reply. It created an undeniable emotional distance, a necessary buffer zone against the corrosive drip of their negativity. I poured every ounce of my being, all my focus, all my resilience into making Innovate and Elevate succeed, driven partly by genuine passion for the educational technology I was creating, partly by a fierce, burning need to finally, definitively prove them wrong, to one day force them, however grudgingly, to acknowledge that my crazy little internet idea wasn't so crazy after all. The breakthrough didn't arrive as a single dramatic Hollywood moment, but as a series of incremental, hard-won milestones accumulated over several grueling years. Securing a crucial seed funding round from an unconventional angel investor, a retired female tech executive who saw potential where traditional VCs saw only risk. Landing our first major corporate client, a Fortune 500 company, no less, a six-figure contract that felt like winning the lottery and finally allowed me to hire my first 3 desperately needed employees and lease a tiny, shared office space that wasn't my living room. The successful, critically acclaimed launch of our flagship interactive learning platform, EngageLearn, which quickly gained traction in the corporate training market and garnered rave reviews for its user-friendly design and effectiveness. Positive press mentions started appearing, cautiously at first in local Seattle tech blogs, then graduating to more prominent mentions in national business publications. We grew steadily, organically, then suddenly, exponentially. We hired more software engineers, instructional designers, sales reps, support staff. We moved into progressively larger, more professional office spaces, finally landing in our current, impressive downtown location. We refined our products based on user feedback, expanded our client base internationally, navigated the inevitable growing pains of scaling a business from nothing. I worked relentlessly, often feeling like I was holding the entire enterprise together with sheer willpower and caffeine, reinvesting profits, carefully building a strong, positive company culture, learning to delegate, painfully at first, learning to lead. Through all this significant growth and validation from the outside world, my family remained largely, almost willfully, oblivious to the true scale and nature of my success. They vaguely knew I had an online business of some sort, and they grudgingly acknowledged I seemed to be doing okay now because I no longer mentioned financial struggles. I'd learned that lesson years ago. But they had absolutely no real concept of what Innovate and Elevate Solutions had actually become, its revenue, its impact, its reputation within its industry. In their minds, I suspect, I was still just Claire, puttering away on her computer, involved in some sort of vaguely embarrassing internet scheme. The Forbes 30 Under 40 feature, I was a late bloomer, making the 40 Under 40 list was my goal, was the first undeniable crack in their carefully constructed, long-held narrative of my impending failure or, at best, marginal existence. Self-correction, changed to 40 Under 40, as character is 40. The Forbes 40 Under 40 feature, when it came out last year recognizing me for innovation in edtech, was the first undeniable crack in their carefully constructed, long-held narrative of my impending failure or, at best, marginal existence. My mother called me the day after a cousin excitedly forwarded her the online link. "Claire, is this your company? Innovate and Elevate Solutions that this Forbes magazine is talking about? The one with 50 employees?" Her voice was thin, reedy, laced with an unmistakable note of stunned disbelief. It was as if she couldn't reconcile the confident CEO pictured in the article with the daughter she'd always pitied. "Yes, Mom," I'd replied calmly, bracing myself. "That's my company." "Oh, well, isn't that quite something?" she'd stammered, clearly flustered, struggling to process this new reality that contradicted years of her own predictions. There was no warmth, no audible pride, no simple "congratulations, honey, that's wonderful." Just bewildered, almost grudging, surprise. Jessica's reaction was even more telling, more wounding in its own way, complete radio silence. She never mentioned the article, not in a text, Not in an email, not during our next brief, awkward phone call initiated by me. It was as if it hadn't happened. My father, during our subsequent perfunctory weekly call, mumbled a quick, uncomfortable, "Saw that thing? Forbes. Good for you," before immediately changing the subject to the Eagles' recent performance. Their reactions, or lack thereof, spoke volumes. My success, when it became undeniable, wasn't something to be celebrated. It was something inconvenient, something that disrupted their established worldview, perhaps even something that made them vaguely uncomfortable. The real shift in their attitude, the one that led directly to the emails currently sitting unopened in my inbox, began about 6 months ago. While Innovate and Elevate was navigating a period of rapid, successful expansion, securing another major round of investment and planning international growth, storm clouds were gathering ominously back in their world in suburban Philadelphia. Dad, who had embraced early retirement with perhaps more enthusiasm than financial planning, discovered the harsh reality that his modest pension and Social Security weren't stretching nearly as far as he'd optimistically projected, especially with the relentless upward creep of healthcare costs and property taxes. Worse, a significant chunk of their retirement nest egg, invested based on a can't-miss inside tip from his golf buddy Stan, turned out to be invested in something perilously close to a Ponzi scheme, vanishing almost overnight when the SEC finally caught up. Suddenly, their comfortable retirement looked anything but. Money wasn't just tight. It was becoming a source of constant gnawing anxiety. Mom's previously infrequent calls started including stressed sighs about unexpected car repairs they couldn't afford, the ever-increasing price of groceries, the looming need for expensive dental work she kept putting off. Simultaneously, the large, seemingly unshakable insurance conglomerate where Jessica had built her entire decade-long career, the very bastion of stability my parents had always held up as the gold standard, in contrast to my risky venture, announced massive, brutal, company-wide layoffs due to unforeseen market shifts and the need for strategic restructuring. Jessica, despite her years of loyal service and consistently adequate though uninspired performance reviews, found herself deemed redundant, her position eliminated. Her safe, predictable job, the one that had always been her primary source of identity and subtle superiority over me, vanished literally overnight. The severance package was respectable by industry standards, but hardly enough to sustain her accustomed lifestyle indefinitely, especially as she quickly discovered that finding a comparable mid-level position in the shrinking insurance sector, particularly with her rather niche skill set in complex claims processing, was proving incredibly difficult in a suddenly flooded job market. The change in the family dynamic was palpable, almost immediate. The subtle mockery about my business ceased entirely. The condescending concern about my well-being was replaced by a new, almost deferential, slightly desperate curiosity about my world. So, Claire, how is the company actually doing these days? Keeping busy over there? Mom would ask, her voice laced with an unfamiliar note of tentative, almost fearful interest. Read somewhere the tech sector is still hiring a lot. Are you folks looking for anyone at the moment? Dad might inquire with feigned casualness, pretending it was just general chit-chat about the economy. Jessica, when she occasionally answered my calls, I felt obligated to check in, despite our strained relationship, sounded utterly lost, adrift, and increasingly panicked, complaining bitterly about ageism in her job search, the callousness of her former employer, and the sheer unfairness of her predicament. The first direct appeal, the opening salvo in the campaign that culminated in today's emails, came, predictably, from Jessica herself, about 2 months after her layoff. An email titled, with forced brightness, "Catching Up and a Potential Idea." It began with a lengthy, self-pitying account of her job search woes, her mounting frustration, her dwindling severance package. Then, the clumsy pivot. And it just got me thinking, Claire, randomly. You know, I've always been super organized, meticulous with details, and really good with handling difficult people from all those years dealing with complex insurance claims, right? Does Innovate and Elevate maybe, possibly, need someone in like a project coordination role? Or maybe client liaison? Or even operations support? I'm a really fast learner, and honestly, it would be so much fun to actually work together, sis. Maybe? Project coordination? Client liaison? Operations support? Her experience meticulously processing arcane insurance forms while demanding attention to detail hardly translated directly to managing complex software development sprints, navigating high-stakes negotiations with corporate VPs in the edtech sphere, or overseeing the logistical intricacies of a rapidly scaling tech company. The suggestion wasn't just naive, it was ludicrous, born clearly of desperation and a profound, persistent lack of understanding, or perhaps willful ignorance, of what my company actually did and the level of expertise required. Before I could even formulate a polite, carefully worded, evasive reply that wouldn't completely sever our already frayed connection, the emails from Mom and Dad arrived in quick succession, clearly a coordinated, pre-planned pincer movement. Mom's email tugged shamelessly at the heartstrings, pleading Jessica's case with maternal anguish. "She's just so terribly down, Claire. It honestly breaks my heart to see her struggling like this. That horrible company treated her so unfairly after all those years of loyal service. Sweetie, couldn't you please find something for her at your wonderful company? Even just something part-time to start? Anything to give her a boost, get her confidence back? You know, family has to help family, especially in times like these, right?" Dad's email was blunter, more direct, appealing to my long-ignored, now conveniently remembered, sense of familial duty, and implicitly his patriarchal authority. "Claire, your mother and I are becoming seriously worried about Jessica's situation. She needs a stable position, and she needs it soon. Your company seems to be doing exceptionally well from what we hear. It only seems right and proper that you should offer your sister a significant hand up now. Find a suitable spot for her in your organization. Let me know what you arrange by the end of the week." It wasn't phrased as a request. It read chillingly like an instruction, a directive from the patriarch who still saw himself as the head of the family, even while implicitly acknowledging his own diminished circumstances. And woven subtly, almost artfully into both their emails were unmistakable hints about their own increasingly precarious financial situation. Mom mentioned how incredibly stressful it was, constantly worrying about Jessica and the rising cost of everything these days. Dad alluded again to the possibility of needing to find some kind of part-time work myself, just to supplement their shrinking income and cover unexpected expenses. The unspoken, multi-layered message was crystal clear. First, rescue Jessica. Then be prepared, perhaps, to rescue us, too. My successful company, the unlikely venture they dismissed and ridiculed for the better part of a decade, was now suddenly, miraculously, envisioned as the Tran Family Employment Agency, emergency bailout fund, and retirement supplement plan, all rolled into one. Reading those 3 emails, one after the other, felt like reaching the final, farcical scene in a decade-long absurdist play. The sheer, unmitigated, breathtaking gall of it all. The complete, almost pathological reversal from condescending mockery to desperate begging, without a single syllable of acknowledgement for their years of negativity, without a shred of genuine understanding of my business or the professional standards I had fought tooth and nail to establish. A dark, cynical part of me, the wounded part that had swallowed years of their dismissal and doubt, felt a grim, undeniable wave of vindication surge through my veins. So that cynical voice whispered, "Now you need me. Now my little hobby business looks pretty damn good, doesn't it? Now who needs whom?" But the dominant feeling, overriding the fleeting dark satisfaction, was a profound, bone-deep weariness. A weariness of constantly being misunderstood, misrepresented, underestimated by my own blood. a weariness of having my hard-won accomplishments perpetually undervalued until the precise moment they became potentially useful to them, a weariness of their staggering, almost pathological lack of self-awareness. They didn't suddenly respect my journey or my achievements. They just saw a potential, convenient lifeboat as their own. Familiar, comfortable ships were undeniably taking on water. They weren't asking for an opportunity based on merit or genuine interest. They were demanding a handout, a rescue package, based solely on a family connection they themselves had actively strained and devalued for years. My decision, I realized with sudden clarity, couldn't be based on that fleeting, ultimately empty satisfaction of seeing them humbled. It certainly couldn't be based on any lingering sense of familial obligation. Their consistent past actions, culminating in this latest display of entitled desperation, had effectively eroded that bond down to the bedrock. My decision had to be rooted in principle, in professionalism, in fairness to the 50 dedicated employees who had believed in my vision when my own family hadn't, and who worked incredibly hard every day to make Innovate and Elevate Solutions the success it was. And perhaps, just perhaps, my decision had to incorporate one final, clarifying, real-world lesson for my family. A lesson in consequences, professionalism, and the difference between familial support and professional entitlement. My better idea solidified, not out of malice, but out of a need for definitive closure and boundary setting. I wouldn't slam the door cruelly in their faces, but I absolutely wouldn't simply wave them inside without question either. I would hold the door open, just a crack, but only if they could demonstrate the ability and the willingness to walk through it according to the same rules, the same standards, as everyone else in the professional world they claim to respect so much more than mine. I took a long, slow, deep breath, centering myself. Then I began drafting my replies, choosing my words with the same meticulous care and strategic consideration I applied to drafting a multi-million-dollar client proposal. The tone needed to be professional, courteous, empathetic on the surface, but underneath, absolutely firm and grounded in inescapable business reality. To Jessica, my sister, the one whose request felt both the most personal and the most professionally inappropriate, I wrote, "Hi, Jessica. Thank you for reaching out and for sharing your current situation. I was truly sorry to hear about the layoff at her former company name, and I can only imagine how frustrating and difficult the subsequent job search must be. I know the market can be incredibly tough right now, especially for career transitions. Regarding potential opportunities here at Innovate and Elevate Solutions, I appreciate you thinking of us. As you can imagine, roles here tend to be quite specialized, requiring specific experience in educational technology development, digital marketing strategy, or software engineering. While we don't currently have an open position that directly aligns with your extensive background in insurance claims processing, we do happen to have an opening for an entry-level administrative assistant who would be supporting our operations team. The role involves standard administrative duties such as managing schedules for senior staff, coordinating team meetings, handling basic office management tasks, supply orders, vendor coordination, data entry, preparing reports, and providing general support to the operations director. It's definitely a junior position with a corresponding entry-level salary and benefits package, but it does offer valuable exposure to the fast-paced tech industry environment and the internal workings of our company. Like all positions at Innovate and Elevate, regardless of level, this role requires candidates to proceed through our standard, multi-stage interview process. This typically includes an initial HR screening call, followed by skills assessments relevant to the role, e.g., proficiency in office software, organizational skills, written communication, and then interviews with the hiring manager, the operations director, and potentially one or two team members. Our process is designed to be rigorous and objective, ensuring we find the absolute best fit for both the candidate and our specific team, needs, and company culture. If this particular administrative assistant role sounds like something you might genuinely be interested in pursuing at this stage in your career transition, you are more than welcome to submit your professional resume and a tailored cover letter explaining your interest and relevant skills through the official careers portal on our company website, linked to careers page. The application deadline for this position is next Friday date. Please let me know if you have any specific questions about the application process itself. Wishing you the very best in your job search. Best, Claire. Entry level. Administrative assistant. Standard multi-stage interviews. Skills assessments. Team interviews. Corresponding compensation. I knew, with absolute certainty, that this carefully worded offer, positioned correctly and truthfully as the only current possibility that was even remotely feasible, would likely land like a lead balloon. It would almost certainly be perceived as a deliberate insult by Jessica, who clearly envisioned herself stepping into some sort of vaguely defined, comfortably compensated mid-level management role based purely on nepotism. But it was a real opening. We genuinely needed an admin. And the process outlined was exactly, meticulously, what any other external candidate applying for that same role would face. No special treatment, no shortcuts. The ball was now firmly, squarely in her court. Let her demonstrate her alleged organizational skills by navigating the online application portal. To my parents, I crafted a combined reply, keeping the tone respectful but firm, professional, and focused squarely on business facts, deliberately avoiding emotional language. Dear Mom and Dad, thank you both for your recent emails and for expressing your concern for Jessica during this challenging time for her. I certainly understand that unemployment is stressful, and I hope she finds a suitable new position soon. As I have already communicated directly to Jessica, we unfortunately do not have any open roles at Innovate and Elevate Solutions at this time that align with her specific professional background in the insurance industry. The nature of our work in educational technology and digital marketing requires highly specialized skill sets and experience. The only position currently available is an entry-level administrative assistant role. This position, like all roles at our company, necessitates that candidates possess specific qualifications and successfully navigate our standard, rigorous hiring process. This process is essential to ensure fairness to all applicants, and more importantly, to meet the demanding operational needs of our rapidly growing business. Regarding your own thoughts about potential opportunities here, while I appreciate you thinking of Innovate and Elevate, our company operates within a highly specialized, fast-paced technical field. We simply do not have roles, even on a part-time basis, that would be suitable for individuals without direct, relevant experience in software development, digital marketing, instructional design, or related tech fields. Our operational needs require specific expertise, perhaps exploring community resources for retirees seeking supplemental income opportunities, or looking into local programs specializing in career transitions and skills retraining, might prove to be more fruitful avenues for both of you at this time. There are often excellent local resources available. I'm happy to forward some general links to such public resources if that would be helpful. Wishing you both well. Love, Claire Polite. Empathetic on the surface regarding Jessica's situation, but ultimately an unambiguous refusal to create make-work positions or compromise professional standards based purely on family ties. I offered vague pointers towards external resources, a subtle but clear signal that direct help from my company was not on the table for them either. I reread all 3 emails one last time, took another deep breath, and hit send on each, feeling a strange, unsettling mix of trepidation about the inevitable fallout and a quiet, firm resolve. The reactions, when they came, were swift, predictable, and ultimately profoundly illuminating. Jessica replied first within an hour, her email practically vibrating with barely concealed indignation and wounded pride. Claire, thanks for the offer, I guess, she wrote. the sarcastic quotes practically dripping off the screen. But an administrative assistant? Seriously? After managing complex claims portfolios worth millions and dealing with high-pressure negotiations for over 10 years? I think my proven skills and experience are perhaps worth a little bit more than scheduling your meetings and fetching coffee. Obviously, you're not actually interested in helping family. That's fine. Message received. I'll figure something else out on my own, thanks. She didn't even bother to acknowledge the requirement to apply or interview. The mere suggestion was clearly beneath her perceived station. Her response perfectly encapsulated the entitlement and lack of realistic self-assessment that had likely contributed to her career stagnation in the first place. My mother called almost immediately after receiving my email, her voice tight, not with tears this time, but with sharp, undisguised disappointment and anger. Claire Elizabeth Tran, I just read your email. An administrative assistant. Is that supposed to be some kind of cruel joke? Your own sister comes to you, desperate, asking for help, and that's the best you can come up with? And basically telling your father and me that we're too old or too stupid to even answer phones or file papers at your precious tech company? After all, we sacrificed to raise you. I honestly thought you were better than this. It seems all that money and success has gone straight to your head, made you forget all about the people who were there for you. The breathtaking irony of her "all we've done for you" statement, conveniently erasing the decade of mockery and dismissal I had endured regarding the very success she now implicitly criticized me for not sharing sufficiently, seemed entirely lost on her. Her reality was solely constructed around her immediate needs and expectations. My father, true to form, didn't call or email back directly. His silence, in this context, spoke volumes. It signaled wounded pride, a refusal to engage further after his implied directive had been politely but firmly rebuffed, and perhaps a simmering resentment that I hadn't simply fallen into line and solved the family's problems as he clearly felt I should have. His silence was its own form of disapproval, a withdrawal familiar from my childhood. The interaction, however brief and ultimately unpleasant, served its intended clarifying purpose perfectly. It forced them, perhaps for the first time, to confront the unwelcome reality that my company wasn't some amorphous family slush fund or a charitable organization designed to provide sinecures for underqualified relatives. It was a legitimate, thriving, demanding business operating in a competitive market, with established professional standards, rigorous hiring processes, and specific operational needs. Their wholesale dismissal of my work and my industry for all those years meant they had absolutely no genuine concept of what those standards entailed, what skills were actually required, or whether Jessica or they themselves could possibly meet them. My refusal to simply bypass our established procedures and hand over unearned jobs wasn't me being cruel, ungrateful, or forgetful of family. It was me acting precisely like the competent, responsible CEO they never truly believed I could become. By offering the process instead of the position, I had held up a mirror, reflecting back not malice, but the uncomfortable truth of the chasm between their entitled expectations and the professional reality they were clearly unprepared or fundamentally unwilling to engage with. Their indignant refusal to even consider the entry-level role or navigate the standard application process was the final damning confirmation of their true motives and their ingrained sense of exceptionalism. The fallout wasn't a single dramatic explosion, but rather a gradual, definitive cooling, a final crystallization of the distance that had been growing for years. The already infrequent, often strained phone calls from my parents ceased almost entirely, dwindling to awkward, obligatory texts on birthdays and major holidays. Jessica, as previously noted, unfriended me on all social media platforms, a juvenile gesture that I only noticed weeks later when a mutual friend mentioned it, feeling more bemused than hurt. The fragile, fraying bridge of communication, already weakened by years of sustained disregard and misunderstanding, had finally, irrevocably, crumbled under the weight of their unmet, unreasonable expectations and my steadfast refusal to compromise my hard-won professional integrity to appease them. In the months, and then years, that followed that decisive email exchange, the silence from Philadelphia settled into a permanent fixture in the landscape of my life. It wasn't an angry silence necessarily, but a vast, empty one. It was the sound of a door quietly, firmly closing on a painful chapter. Initially, that quiet felt unsettling, tinged with residual guilt. That old ingrained good daughter programming dies hard, and a lingering sadness for the close, supportive family I had always craved, but reality proved I never truly had. But gradually, incrementally, that unsettling quiet morphed into a profound, unexpected sense of peace. The constant low-level background hum of anxiety, worrying about their judgment, bracing for the next passive-aggressive comment, anticipating the next unspoken or spoken financial expectation, was simply gone, extinguished. Freed from that psychic weight, I poured my energy back into the things that genuinely nourished me. Innovate and Elevate Solutions continued to thrive, securing another major round of investment that allowed us to expand into European markets and further develop our cutting-edge learning platforms. I led my team through the challenges of international growth, finding deep satisfaction in building something impactful, in fostering a positive and collaborative work environment where talent was nurtured and contributions were genuinely valued. My work, once the object of my family's scorn and skepticism, became my sanctuary, my source of pride, a place where my skills were celebrated, my vision respected, and my leadership valued by colleagues who had actually chosen to be part of the journey, who saw the potential when others hadn't. Outside of work, I consciously invested in my own life. I traveled extensively, using my own hard-earned money for adventures I chose, hiking in Patagonia, exploring ancient ruins in Cambodia, taking a cooking class in Tuscany, experiences that broadened my horizons and filled my soul, rather than funding someone else's fleeting whims or propping up unsustainable lifestyles. I strengthened the bonds with my chosen family, my close circle of supportive friends in Seattle, who had cheered me on through the lean years and celebrated my successes without reservation. I deepened my relationship with my wonderful partner, Mark, a different, kinder Mark. A man who admired my ambition, respected my independence, and valued me for exactly who I was, not for what I could provide financially. I built a life in Seattle based on mutual respect, shared values, intellectual curiosity, and genuine affection, utterly independent of the stifling family narrative I had finally, definitively shed. News from home arrived only sporadically now, like faint signals from a distant galaxy, usually through the well-meaning but sometimes gossipy filter of distant relatives or old high school acquaintances I occasionally encountered online. Jessica, after months of frustrated unemployment and reportedly burning through her severance package much faster than anticipated, had eventually landed a job. Ironically, it was as an administrative assistant at a small local dental practice, a position significantly below her previous corporate pay grade and perceived status, requiring skills she likely possessed but had previously disdained. Apparently, it was the best she could secure after her prolonged search. My parents were living much more frugally, according to my Aunt Susan. Dad had reportedly tried finding part-time consulting work in his old field, but discovered ageism was rampant and his skills were outdated. He'd settled for a low-stress, low-pay job as a weekend cashier at a local hardware store, mostly, Susan suspected, to get out of the house and away from Mom's constant fretting about money. Mom herself complained frequently to Susan about their tightened budget, the need to cut back on everything, the unfairness of their situation. There was never any hint of apology towards me relayed through the grapevine, no sign of a changed perspective or acknowledgement of their past behavior, only a continuation of their quiet, self-inflicted struggle, now unbuffered by my involuntary, unappreciated financial contributions. The safe choices hadn't proven so safe after all. Hearing this news didn't bring me the sharp sting of vengeful satisfaction I might have anticipated years ago. It just felt distant, flat, like reading about vaguely familiar characters in a cautionary tale about entitlement and lack of foresight. Their reality, the direct, unavoidable consequence of their choices, their attitudes, their years of dismissing my path while failing to secure their own, simply wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Their struggles were theirs to navigate. Standing in my bright, bustling office one rainy Seattle afternoon, watching my talented team passionately brainstorm innovative solutions for a new client challenge on a massive whiteboard, I felt a surprising wave of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for my own resilience, for the mentors who had believed in me, for the colleagues who challenged and supported me, for the sheer luck involved in any entrepreneurial success. The laughter I heard echoing down the hall wasn't the mocking, dismissive kind I remembered stinging my ears in my parents' kitchen. It was the vibrant, energetic sound of collaborative creativity, of shared purpose, of building something worthwhile together. The final laugh, I realized with sudden clarity, wasn't about gloating over my family's diminished circumstances or their belated self-interested recognition of my success. That felt petty, small, ultimately meaningless. The real last laugh was the quiet, internal one. It was the laugh of liberation, liberation from the crushing weight of needing their approval, an approval they were incapable of giving freely, liberation from their narrow, suffocating definitions of what constituted a worthwhile life or career, liberation from the exhausting, endless burden of their negativity and their unacknowledged demands. My better idea, my insistence on professionalism over nepotism, hadn't ultimately been about punishing them. It had been about protecting myself, preserving the integrity of my company, and upholding the professional standards I'd sacrificed so much to build. It was about finally, definitively closing the heavy door on that painful chapter of my life where I was Claire Tran, the perpetual disappointment, the daughter with the silly internet hobby, and fully stepping into, fully owning my role as Claire Tran, CEO, answerable only to my clients, my dedicated employees, my supportive board, and ultimately, my own hard-won conscience. Sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make to those who have consistently underestimated and dismissed you is simply to succeed beyond their wildest imaginings, entirely on your own terms, and then refuse, politely but firmly, to let them ride your coattails when their own chosen paths prove less stable than they assumed. Then, completely out of the blue, nearly a full year after the infamous email exchange and the subsequent chilling silence, a small, anonymously sent, hand-knitted item arrived at my office via USPS. No return address on the padded envelope, but the postmark was unmistakably from suburban Philadelphia. Inside was a soft, beautifully made scarf, knitted in a deep forest green, a color they all knew was my absolute favorite. It was surprisingly well crafted, the stitches mostly even, clearly made with care. Tucked inside the folds of the scarf was a small, plain, folded card. No message, no greeting, no signature, just the scarf itself. I recognized the slightly distinctive, faintly remembered knitting style. It was Jessica's, from a brief, intense knitting phase she'd gone through years ago, one of the many fleeting hobbies I'd likely helped fund, and one whose results I vaguely recalled genuinely complimenting at the time. What did it mean? Was it a silent, tentative peace offering? A nonverbal apology, the only kind she was capable of giving? An acknowledgement, however oblique and inadequate, of the chasm between them? Or was it just a random, meaningless gesture? Perhaps cleaning out a closet and mailing off an old project? Or the cynical part of me whispered, could it even be another calculated, manipulative attempt to test the waters, to see if a small, handmade gift might soften me up, might reopen a door they desperately wanted access to again? Holding the soft, warm wool, the sheer unexpectedness of it created a sudden, unwelcome flicker of the old, complicated, deeply buried sibling connection I thought was long extinguished, cauterized by betrayal. And so here I stand, scarf in hand, faced with yet another choice in this seemingly never-ending family saga. What should I do about this unexpected, unsigned scarf? A. Acknowledge receipt politely but neutrally. Send a brief, simple thank you note or email directly to Jessica. Jessica, thank you for the lovely scarf. It was a surprise. Wishing you well, Claire. This acknowledges her gesture, preventing future awkwardness if you ever cross paths, but offers no warmth, no opening, and clearly signals that the established boundaries remain firmly in place. It's polite, distant closure. B. Do not acknowledge it at all. The gesture, whatever its intent, is far too little, far too late, and utterly fails to address the years of disrespect or the fundamental issues that led to the break. Responding in any way, even neutrally, risks being misinterpreted as an invitation for further contact or reconciliation. Maintain the clean, hard-won break. Silence remains the most effective and unambiguous boundary. Donate the scarf to charity and continue moving forward without looking back.